In the vast and brutal theater of World War II, where victory was often measured in miles gained and enemy divisions destroyed, a different kind of war was waged in the shadows. This was a war of whispers, forged documents, phantom armies, and elaborate lies, woven so skillfully they became indistinguishable from truth. In this shadow war, the most successful and unlikely warrior was not a battle-hardened commando or a disgruntled German aristocrat, but a mild-mannered Spanish chicken farmer named Juan Pujol Garcia, a man of profound principle and even more profound imagination. Armed with little more than a map, a guidebook, and breathtaking audacity, he constructed a web of deception so vast and convincing that he deceived the entire German high command, saved countless thousands of lives, and directly shaped the course of the war. His code name was Garbo, and his story remains, without question, the most brilliant and successful deception operation in the history of modern espionage. To understand the man, one must first understand the crucible that forged him. Juan Pujol Garcia was born in Barcelona in 1912, the son of a liberal Catalan industrialist. His youth was one of relative comfort, but it was shattered by the outbreak of the Spanish Civil War in 1936. This brutal conflict, a dress rehearsal for World War II, pitted the left-leaning Republicans against the fascist nationalists under General Francisco Franco. It was a war of ideologies, and Pujol was caught in the middle. Forced to serve, however briefly and unwillingly, on both sides, he was first conscripted by the Republicans, but deserted after a harrowing experience. He was then captured by the nationalists and forced to serve in one of their labor battalions. This experience of being a pawn in a conflict between two oppressive systems left him with a deep, visceral hatred for totalitarianism in all its forms. He saw the cruelty of the fascists and the chaos of the communists, developing a profound appreciation for democracy, even though he had never lived in one. When World War II engulfed Europe, Pujol felt a powerful moral calling. He could not stand idly by while the Nazi plague spread across the continent. With the unshakable conviction of an ordinary man, he decided he would personally do something to help the good cause. He would become a spy for the Allies. His first foray into espionage was a lesson in rejection and humiliation. In early 1941, he walked into the British embassy in Madrid and offered his services, presenting himself as a man with useful contacts and a burning desire to fight fascism. The British MI6 officers, steeped in suspicion and wary of German double-agent provocateurs, looked at this unassuming Spaniard and saw a trap. They politely but firmly showed him the door. A less determined man would have given up, his pride wounded. He crafted a new persona, a fanatically pro-Nazi Spanish official who, due to his government work, had the opportunity to travel frequently to London. He was fervent, convincing, and played on the Germans' known desire for agents inside Britain. The Abwehr, impressed by his passion and apparent access, recruited him on the spot. They gave him the code name Alaric, provided him with invisible ink, secret codes, a cipher book, a generous cash advance, and instructions to go to Britain and build a network of subagents. There was one monumental flaw in the German plan. Juan Pujol had no intention of going to Britain, and he had no means to get there. Instead, he boarded a train to Lisbon, Portugal, a neutral capital teeming with spies of every allegiance. From a comfortable room in the bustling city of Lisbon, using only a tourist guide to Britain, a map of the British Isles, railway timetables, copies of the British press, and his own prodigiously fertile imagination, Juan Pujol began to construct an entire fictional world. He invented a network of subagents who existed only in his mind and his reports. There was J1, a wealthy, hypochondriac Venezuelan student based in Glasgow, a fervent Nazi sympathizer. J2, a Welsh seaman living in Swansea who provided reports on ship movements in the Bristol Channel. J3, a disillusioned South African soldier stationed in England. And J4, an Indian poet and rabid anti-British nationalist. His masterstroke was inventing J5, a secretary in the British War Office, a coup achieved by simply reading the name of a real department in a newspaper and assigning his fictional agent to it. He even invented a courier, J6, who could travel between the UK and Portugal. Pujols' method was meticulous to an almost obsessive degree. He spent days cross-referencing his sources. If he read a brief news item about a troop movement near a Scottish port, he would have his Venezuelan student in Glasgow confirm it, adding rich local color, the miserable weather, the name of a pub he'd visited, the mood of the locals, all lifted from his guidebook and newspaper society pages. He reported on the morale of the British public, the comings and goings of ships, and military gossip, all fabricated but carefully calibrated to be plausible and just valuable enough to be believable. To explain why he wasn't using a radio, he told the Germans he was trying to recruit a disillusioned RAF radio operator, but needed more money to secure his loyalty. The Germans, impressed by the volume and apparent detail of his reports, sent more funds. By the end of 1941, Juan Pujol was a successful German agent, being paid regular stipends to spy on a country he had never set foot in. Meanwhile, in London, a state of high alarm brewed within the British Secret Intelligence Service. Through their monumental code-breaking operation, Ultra, which deciphered German Enigma messages, they intercepted communications showing a disturbingly accurate picture of British activities, all sourced from a spy network they knew nothing about. MI5 and MI6 were frantic, hunting for a phantom ring of highly effective enemy agents operating with impunity under their noses. It took months of painstaking investigation to trace the source of these reports back to their own rejected applicant, Juan Pujol. The realization was a shock. The man they had turned away had not only become a German agent, but had done so with such success that he was now a significant intelligence asset for the enemy. A British agent was swiftly dispatched to Lisbon to make contact. In April 1942, after a series of cautious meetings, Pujol and his wife were smuggled out of Portugal aboard a British military flight, finally arriving in the country he had been so effectively spying on for nearly a year. He was now in the hands of the professionals. The British paired him with a brilliant and resourceful case officer, a half-Spanish, half-English MI5 agent named Tomas Harris. Together, this duo would become the architects of the war's greatest deception. The British gave Pujol a new codename, one that reflected his unparalleled theatrical genius, Garbo, after the famous actress known as the Woman of 1,000 Faces. Garbo and Harris were a perfect match. They moved into a house in London and professionalized the operation. They expanded his fictional network from a handful of agents to a sprawling organization of 27 entirely fictitious sub-agents. Each had a name, a code number, a detailed backstory, a personality, and a specific role. There was Donnie, the Gibraltarian waiter, Stanley, the Welsh nationalist, and Benedict, the Ceylonese radio operator. Garbo and Harris maintained detailed index cards on each one, tracking their lives, health, personal dramas, and even financial demands to maintain perfect consistency. The Garbo system was a masterpiece of bureaucratic fiction. Communication with the Germans was a carefully managed performance. Reports were sent via secret ink letters to a post office box in Lisbon, and later via encrypted radio transmissions. The sub-agents would sometimes contradict each other or make minor, believable mistakes, which Garbo would then correct in later messages, adding a layer of authentic chaos that made the entire network seem more real. He would complain to his German handlers about the lack of funds, the difficulties of wartime travel, and the unreliability of his agents, all of which reinforced his credibility. The Germans, thoroughly convinced, promoted him and increased his payments, which he dutifully turned over to the British. His value was so immense that the Abwehr even warned him about a supposed British counterintelligence operation that was, in fact, being run by his own handlers. the ultimate test of the Garbo system, and its crowning, world-changing achievement was its central role in Operation Fortitude, the colossal deception plan for the D-Day landings. The Allied invasion of Normandy in June 1944 was the most secretive and anticipated military operation of the war. The Germans knew an invasion was coming. The critical question was where. The Allies' success depended on convincing the German High Command that the main assault would be at the Pass de Calais, the narrowest point of the English Channel, where the geography logically suggested a crossing, and that the landings in Normandy were merely a large-scale diversion. This strategic lie was Garbo's to tell. In the months leading up to D-Day, his network buzzed with fabricated activity. His agents reported on the buildup of an entirely fictional army, the 1st United States Army Group, FUSAG, commanded by the formidable and feared General George S. Patton. Garbo's spies saw phantom divisions, their shoulder patches, their vehicle markings, massing in the fields of Kent and East Anglia. They reported on vast fleets of inflatable tanks and plywood aircraft, fake radio traffic, and the construction of dummy landing craft in the ports opposite Calais. Every report was a carefully crafted thread in a grand tapestry of lies, woven by British intelligence and transmitted with perfect conviction by Garbo. The Germans were utterly convinced. They believed that FUSAG, comprising over 150,000 men, was real and represented the primary Allied threat. They positioned their strongest army, the 15th Army, at Pass de Calais to counter it. Then came the most critical 48 hours of the entire war in Western Europe. On June 6, 1944, the D-Day landings began on the beaches of Normandy. For the Allies, everything hinged on Hitler withholding the powerful 15th Army at Calais. If those panzer and infantry divisions were released to reinforce Normandy in the first 2 days, they could potentially overwhelm the vulnerable beachheads and throw the invading forces back into the sea. As the real battle raged with unimaginable ferocity in France, a battle of pure intellect was fought from a quiet house in London. Garbo knew he had to perform the deception of a lifetime. On the morning of D-Day, he sent a furious, chastising message to his handlers in Madrid, expressing deep frustration, claiming he had tried to send a vital message the night before, warning that the invasion fleet was sighted and that Normandy was the target. But his, fictional, radio operator had been unavailable. This deliberate, calculated delay proved his network was brilliant enough to discover the truth while ensuring the information was tactically useless to the Germans. It was a move of sheer genius, protecting his credibility at the most dangerous moment. His masterstroke came later on D-Day. After a tense, scripted meeting with his British handlers, Garbo sent his most important transmission of the war. He reported that his top agent, the fictional secretary in the War Office, had confirmed from the highest levels that the Normandy landings were, in fact, a diversionary maneuver designed to draw German reserves away from the main objective, the Pass de Calais. The message was a work of art, blending just enough truth with the crucial strategic lie. It was so authoritative and convincing that it was rushed directly to Hitler's headquarters in East Prussia. The result was nothing short of miraculous. The Führer, who trusted Garbo's reporting implicitly, became convinced that the real, decisive invasion was still to come. He refused to release the 15th Army from Calais. For 7 critical weeks, weeks that decided the fate of the Normandy campaign, 19 of Germany's best divisions, including entire panzer units, sat idle, waiting for an attack from an army that did not exist. They guarded empty coastlines against phantom soldiers, while the real Allied army bled and fought its way inland. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, commanding the German defenses in Normandy, was denied the reinforcements he desperately pleaded for. This delay, orchestrated by one man and his cast of imaginary characters, was a catastrophic strategic blunder for Germany. Military historians universally agree that it shortened the war in Europe by months and saved tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of Allied lives. The Germans were so grateful that on July 29, 1944, they informed Garbo that Hitler himself had awarded him the Iron Cross, second class, for his extraordinary service. In a moment of stunning historical irony, the British, not to be outdone, later awarded him the Member of the British Empire, MBE. Juan Pujol Garcia is almost certainly the only person in history to receive high military honors from both sides of the same World War. As the war in Europe drew to a close, the Garbo operation faced its final challenge: how to let its star agent retire without raising post-war suspicion. In a final act of masterful theater, Garbo sent a series of messages warning the Germans that his network was in grave danger of being uncovered by a relentless British security service. He then went into hiding. After VE Day, the British faked the arrest and death of one of his key sub-agents to provide a plausible explanation for the network's sudden collapse. The Germans never suspected a thing. To the very end, Agent Alaric was remembered in surviving Abwehr files as one of their most loyal, productive, and courageous spies. When the war ended, Juan Pujol Garcia vanished. Fearing reprisals from lingering Nazi sympathizers, he faked his own death from malaria in Angola and, with the help of the British, emigrated to Venezuela, where he started a new, quiet life running a small bookshop and then a gift shop. For over a quarter of a century, his incredible story remained a closely guarded secret, buried in classified intelligence files. It was only in 1984, when historian Nigel West painstakingly tracked him down in his Venezuelan retirement, that the full, breathtaking extent of his contributions to the Allied victory came to light. The legacy of Agent Garbo is almost incomprehensible in its scale and impact. His strategic deceptions, particularly around D-Day, saved an incalculable number of lives. He sent over 315 radio messages and countless secret letters to the Germans, all vetted and often co-written by British intelligence, meaning he single-handedly fed the entire German high command a narrative almost entirely controlled by the Allies. He wasted German resources, misdirected their strategies, and sowed confusion at the highest levels of command. Juan Pujol Garcia was not a soldier in the traditional sense, but he was one of the war's most effective warriors. His battlefield was the human mind, and his weapons were creativity, patience, meticulousness, and an unshakable belief in his cause. He proved that a single individual, armed not with a rifle, but with intellect and moral courage, could alter the trajectory of history. In a world dominated by brute force and industrial might, he was a living testament to the power of an idea, a carefully woven lie that helped secure the victory of truth and freedom. The spy who fooled Hitler did more than deceive an enemy. He helped liberate a continent from tyranny, all from the confines of his own magnificent and unwavering imagination.